I request Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Nitin Karmalkar, sir, please come forward with the Honorable Sheshadri Chari, Pro Vice-Chancellor, Professor Umrani. Please come forward, sir. Arvind Kumar ante हैं. खचे Sir, please come forward. Can you give me 2 chairs? Sir, please. Shall I start? Yeah. Good morning to everyone. Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Nitin Karmalkar, sir, today's chief guest for giving a talk on geopolitical changes in Afghanistan and its impact on global security environment, Professor Dr. Sheshadri Chari. Along with him, Professor Arvind Kumar, who is a professor at JNU, Dr. Pro Vice-Chancellor, Honorable N.S. Umrani, Management Council Member, Mr. Rajesh Pandeyji, Air Marshal Bhushan Gokhale, Air Marshal Soman, General Oak, Resident Scholar of Department of Defense and Strategic Studies, students and my dear Afghan students, Dean, Faculty of Commerce, Dr. Karmalkar, please come forward, sir. And dear friends, today we are going to have an interaction with Afghan student. We all aware that Savitribai Phule Pune University hosting the large number of international students, particularly from Afghanistan. From last 5 years, I am heading that international center and I have authentic data, and from last 5 years, almost I have admitted more than 1,000+ students only from Afghanistan. Most of the students are staying in affiliated college hostels or own flat around the city, and few of them we are accommodating on university campus, particularly girls hostel and boys hostel, those students who are studying on campus department. Considering the present nature of Afghan crisis, the kind of changes is coming up, particularly the student, those who are stuck in Pune city and around the Pune city, they are worried about their number of issues. And for that, in the first day, Honorable Vice-Chancellor has taken number of initiatives. First day, when officially Taliban took over on Kabul, that day, Honorable Vice-Chancellor instructed to us, whatever support extend to all Afghan students, we can extend it. And in fact, he has written a letter to ministry that those student visa is going to expire. For them, give the extension of the visa as well as other issues. Apart from that, our university alumni cell as well as student development department also launched a helpline, which helpline is playing important role that 24/7 you can connect that helpline and you can raise your issues. So considering that nature of issues, university authorities and all our colleague and Honorable Vice-Chancellor has directed to extend all kind of support. But at the same time, it is not the support for Afghan students who are studying on campuses. Look at the Afghanistan crisis in a geopolitical perspective. It is not only a religious extremism. There is a paradigm shift in a geopolitics as well as the geoeconomics and global security environment. We need to understand all perspectives while understanding the Afghan issues. And today we have with us Honorable Sheshadri Chari, who is a renowned strategic expert who has spent more than 5 decades in this field of security and foreign policy issues. And he is with us. He is in a department, and we thought that why not we have an interaction with Afghan student, and he is with us, sir. On behalf of Savitribai Phule Pune University, on behalf of all university authorities, I welcome you, sir. Give a big applause to him. Apart from the Honorable Sheshadri Chari, we have Professor Arvind Kumar. He is a renowned international relations and security expert and professor and heading the department in Jawaharlal Nehru University. I'll just briefly introduce both of the speakers who is going to talk on geopolitical and security changes in Afghanistan. Then after lecture, we will have it a direct interaction with the Afghan student. Let me briefly introduce, most of them have seen Honorable Sheshadri Chari on NDTV. If you look at all strategic debates, he is the person who point a finger on what is India's interest and how we could change the foreign policy. I'll just briefly introduce him. Sheshadri Chari is currently engaged as a Director, International Affairs, Institute for National Security Studies, Director, Forum for Strategic and Security Studies, Secretary General, Forum for Integrated National Security, non-officio member, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, and he is also the Director of Chronicle Society of India for Education and Academic Research, a high-profile NGO actively engaged in promoting educational activity and conducting significant research in areas like pluralism and democracy, conflict resolution, role of religion in fostering communal harmony. He is also the Vice President for the Society of Consumers and Investor Protection. Apart from that, he was associated, he was the United Nations consultant more than 3 years. He spent in Africa, and he played a crucial role in Africa on behalf of the United Nations. I would like to request Honorable Vice-Chancellor to felicitate Honorable Sheshadri Chari with bouquet, with shawl and memento. I would like to request Honorable Vice-Chancellor to felicitate. I would like to request Rajesh Pandey to felicitate Arvind Kumar. Student Development Director, Dr. Paruchare will felicitate Honorable Pro Vice-Chancellor. Sir, VC sir first. Sorry. Thank you. Sanjay, Professor Sanjay Dole, please felicitate to Honorable Pro Vice-Chancellor. And I request Desai sir to felicitate Karmalkar sir. You did. Okay. You just.
I request Professor Khare to felicitate Honorable Mr. Rajesh Pandey sir.
Now I request Honorable Vice Chancellor to say introductory remark or just give introductory remarks. Thank you.
Namaskar, very good morning to every one of you. Respected dais, today's speaker, Dr. Sheshadri Chari, Dr. Arvind Kumar, my colleague, Pro Vice-Chancellor, N.S. Umrani sir, Rajeshji Pandey, Parag Karmalkar, many of the dignitaries present from the defense studies, the students, Afghan students, many of the professors, heads of the department. Indeed, it's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. And the topic is very apt. We have seen like what has been happening in Afghan, and because of which the largest footprint of Afghan students that we have or other hosts on the campus of the University of Pune. I've been told day before yesterday there are 2,000 Afghan students presently been there for various different purposes in Pune. Most of them are doing their graduation, post-graduation. Some of them have completed their graduation but could not go back because of the very delicate kind of a situation in Afghan. And therefore, when they approached me, we had a meeting day yesterday and we thought of starting a helpline through which we intend to actually address the various different issues the Afghan students are facing. Many of them got admitted through ICCR, but they could not make it to Pune. They're still there on the land of Afghan, and there are issues of visas. Some students actually finding it difficult. The visa is getting over. The extension is the issue. So the other day I spoke to the ICCR president, and in fact it happened in front of you. He addressed you too. So the government is very cordial. It intends to actually help every one of you. And whatever best that we can do for you, we are trying to do it. And besides all that, whether it is extension of the fellowship, some of the students staying outside the campus basically, and there is quite a pressure mounting from the owner for payment and all that. And since the money has stopped coming, so obviously various different issues you all are facing, but not to worry. It is not a promise, it is an assurance. We are with you all, and every problem that you face, we'll be with you to resolve it. And with that intention, in fact, beyond all these issues, what is the real issue? Why it has happened, how it is happening, and what is its impact or repercussion on geopolitical basically scenario, especially the security issues as such. Afghan has been very friendly country of India, and not necessarily in the near past. It's been there historically. You can see that it is closely basically associated with the Indian land as such, and therefore it's very near and dear to us, and we consider it to be our utmost duty to see your security. So, but beyond that, basically, let's understand this particular problem, how long is going to persist, what would be its repercussion on the various different elements, And keeping those things in mind, basically, today's lecture has been organized. And we have a very renowned geopolitical analyst, strategist, Dr. Sheshadri Chari. So without wasting more time, I leave the dais open to Sheshadri Chari. Thank you so very much.
Honorable Vice-Chancellor, other respected scholars on the dais, I see a number of war veterans in front of me, faculty and students. Sometimes it becomes a little difficult to speak on a subject on which I have acquired information, but there are people here who have experienced not only the war but also lived in Afghanistan. So a number of students from Afghanistan have not just acquired information, but they have lived through a number of incidents that we are seeing now. So it becomes very difficult to actually explain to those who already know what is happening. Another trepidation for me, or a little bit of a discomfort for me to speak, is much of my knowledge on geopolitics and international relations that I have acquired is all because of Professor Arvind Kumar here, who is my friend, philosopher, guide. So to speak in front of him, of course he is kind enough not to tell me that I have made mistakes, but after the speech I am sure he is going to tell me that. So we have to look at the present scenario essentially from three aspects. I will not go into the incidents that are taking place, because much of what is happening in Afghanistan is so fast that the news bulletin at 10 a.m. is old at 11 a.m. So there is no point in keeping track of minute to minute or hour to hour or even day to day happenings that are going on. But it has three important aspects. One is to all those people, the people of Afghanistan who are in Afghanistan now. People of Afghanistan who are out of Afghanistan. And an India-centric view, because we are looking at Afghanistan and the incidents in Afghanistan from India. So what is the implications? What are the implications for us? What are the consequences for us? And these are some of the issues that we will have to tackle, we will have to understand. And then we will be able to come to some kind of a structure as to what options we have. One thing we all know, I won't go into the history of Afghanistan, especially in front of those students who are from Afghanistan. So when we are talking about Afghanistan, we see the reports that the Americans have quit Afghanistan after 20 years. But this is not the first time the Americans are quitting Afghanistan. Rather, this is practically the third time. And officially it is the second time. So when we say they are quitting, they came in the first place in 2001. So why did they come in at 2001? In 2001, and they came in 2001, which means they had already left before 2001. Why did they leave? And then when they left the first time, why did they come into Afghanistan first time? So you'll have to slightly go not just to 2021 or 2001 or maybe 1981, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80. These are all very important events. From India's point of view, from Afghanistan's point of view, if you have to know the American background. So what the Americans called as war on terror. In 2001 they came in, they said it is war on terror. But in 1979-80 when they came in, it was not war on terror. So why did they come? So essentially the US is involved in Afghanistan as part of its larger conflict with USSR, what is very popularly known as the Cold War. After the end of the Second World War, the Cold War started. So Afghanistan became a theater, unwittingly an arena of Cold War. And there were reports, especially the 75 to 80 strategic analysts in the US were more worried about the expansionist views and policies of the USSR. So there was a report, rather there was a thinking in the American strategic community that USSR is expanding. USSR is the declared enemy of the US, and it was a dogmatic war between the communist world and the non-communist world, or rather they call it the free world and the not so free world, the laissez-faire economy and the state economy, of freedom on the one side, represented by US and the Western world, and an authoritarian system represented by the Soviet Union. So they basically analyzed all these things and put it in a very broad framework that whatever is the strategy of the Soviet Union, US will have to find an alternative strategy to it. So it was seriously believed by the strategic community in the US that Soviet Union's expansionist program includes a new area of expansion which would go beyond the then Central Asia, the present Central Asia also, the CIS countries. And then the Soviets are planning to form a kind of an axis which would include Soviet Union, of course, the CIS countries, Central Africa, Central Asia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran. And then the Soviet Union would have a broad control over the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. The idea of Asia-Pacific and Indo-Pacific was not very prevalent then. So I'm not going into the Pacific side of it. So from Persian Gulf to Indian Ocean, it will be a very broad area which will be controlled by the Soviet Union. So in order to stop this, US will have to initiate certain policies, an action plan which will prevent the Soviet Union from getting closer to Persian Gulf. If that has to be done, the Soviets will have to be stopped at some place, which is the most comfortable and convenient place where it can be stopped. And that happens to be Afghanistan. That is how the US got involved with Afghanistan the first time. And then started a whole series of actions and counter actions. And then after the end of the Cold War, disintegration of the Soviet Union, the purpose of the US, the objective of US to stop the Soviet Union from getting closer to Persian Gulf or Indian Ocean was stopped. It was finished. Ideally, a strategically advanced country like the US would have continued to stay there and established a democratic process in all these places. But very unfortunately, the US thought that since our purpose, there was a limited purpose, that means the limited objective is over, they left. Then we know the other incidents, the Red Army and so many other things, the Northern Alliance. I won't go into those details. When the US was worried again that the Soviet Union will have to be stopped once and for all, one of the tools that they employed, there are enough details about this, so I won't go into those details again. One of the tools that they employed was to create an army which will fight the Soviet Union on behalf of the US without actually getting into any kind of a collateral damage for the US army or the US forces or the US men who are fighting the war actually. And then we know about the creation of Taliban. I won't go into those details also. Interestingly, a country which strongly believes in freedom of individuals, which strongly advocates freedom, it's very surprising that they would form a very, I won't say a very fundamentalist, but rather a radical organization based on certain religious principles. Why would they do that? There is a very interesting observation by Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace was a sort of a strategic thinker who was in 1947. He wrote a number of theories on US policies. So there is a very interesting sentence by Henry Wallace. This observation he has made in 1947, remember. He says, there is no regime too reactionary, no regime too reactionary for us, for the US, provided it stands in Russia's expansionist path. There is no country too remote to serve as the scene of a contest which may widen until it becomes a world war. This is what he wrote in 1947. So there is no regime which can be considered to be reactionary for the US, as long as it serves our purpose. And there is no country which is remote. Remember, all the wars that US fights, US is one country which does not have a region. Unlike China has a region, India has a region, US does not have a region. US has got neighbors, Canada and Mexico, but they don't have a region. So all the wars that the US has fought is in other regions, from faraway countries. US has never fought a war with Canada, right, sir? So there is no country too remote to serve as the scene of a contest, which may widen until it becomes a world war. So this is the reason why US chose Afghanistan as an arena of war to fight the Soviets, and Afghanistan became one of the arena as far as the Cold War is concerned. Now, very interestingly, what the US policymakers should have realized is Afghanistan has practically been the Waterloo for the British, for the Soviets, and also for the Americans. So that's why I am hopeful that those who are writing obituary of other countries and then eulogizing a new set of countries that are going to enter Afghanistan and benefit, they are going to face the same fate that the British, Russians, and the Americans have met. This we should remember from the history of Afghanistan. So I won't again go into the history of Afghanistan because many of the students here are from Afghanistan. So when we juxtapose these things to what happened in 2021, then we would know that US entered Afghanistan practically, it's a very serious statement that I'm making, without any objective. There was no objective. What was the objective? They said the objective is to fight a war on terror. If the objective was to fight a war on terror, what should have they done? They should have created some sort of an alliance, preferably a democratic alliance, which would build the capacity of the Afghans to democratically elect a government, which they did not do. They depended upon a undemocratic outfit to defeat the Soviets. They armed that particular outfit. They empowered that outfit with political authority without any responsibility to the people of Afghanistan. So it was not an Afghanistan-based Afghan people elected government that they put in place in Kabul, but it was an outfit which was used as a tool to fight the Soviet Union. The moment the Soviet Union was defeated, the Americans left. Even at that time, a number of people had suggested to the US strategic thinkers that you should not leave now. But they left. And they left at what stage? They left at a time when the outfit that they had created was having political authority without responsibility. It was fully equipped. It was an army. Fighting fit army with all the tools of a war. Naturally, they took advantage of that situation, and the solution that the Americans created became a problem for the Americans. We know about the rest of the World Trade Center, terror attacks and all that, which made the Americans come back and punish that outfit which they had created. So what happened in 2001 and all we know about it. But then what is important as of today is what happened in those 20 years. What the Americans could have done in 1979 or 80, they could have done in 2001 also. Reconstruction of Afghanistan, democratizing the state machinery, creating an official army, capacity building of the people, none of this they did. What they did in 20 years is a different matter. But after 20 years, and after spending almost trillions of dollars, one fine morning they decided that this is enough, we are quitting. So quitting was ill-timed, quitting was unplanned. Obviously unplanned, why I am saying unplanned is, if there was a plan, then this would not have happened. So practically, as they say, history has a very bad obsession of repeating itself. Afghanistan is the fit case where we see history repeating itself. Only the countries differ. So now we are in a situation where there is chaos, confusion, there is a leadership struggle, and a situation which could have been easily avoided. So why the US did it, whether they did it with purpose or not, whether they could have done it in a better manner is a different story. But what happens, why we should be concerned is Afghanistan happens to be in our region. Till 15th August 1947, India had a border with Afghanistan before the creation of Pakistan. The creation of Pakistan has a different story and a different subject, so there is no need to go into that subject as of now. There are so many reasons why Pakistan was created. The British left India practically the same way as the USS left Afghanistan in 2021. Even the division of India and Pakistan, the actual maps and divisions which were made in less than 6 months. So I won't go into those details. They are all historic details which are all available on, and many of you are aware of those details. But one of the reasons for the creation of Pakistan was again, has its roots in the Cold War. So during the emerging days of the Cold War, the British, the Western world and mainly the British were worried that if India becomes independent, Iran is independent, Afghan, of course, again will be independent. So what happens with these three independent countries and a very powerful Soviet Union will have an axis whereby there will be again a Soviet Union, India, Iran, Afghanistan axis, and Soviet Union will control the ocean. The same theory, Persian Gulf to Indian Ocean. How to prevent Soviet Union from getting foothold in the Indian Ocean was the biggest question before the British strategic thinkers at that time. And one of the ideas that they thought was to create a buffer between the Indian Ocean and the Soviet Union. So create a religious buffer which the communist world will not be comfortable with. So creation of an Islamic state between Indian Ocean and Soviet Union will prevent Soviet Union from getting too close to India or Iran or Afghanistan. So this buffer will work. A similar buffer that the Americans thought of, the British thought. From 47, come to 2021. Which is the country that we are talking about, which is going to benefit the maximum out of the Americans quitting Afghanistan, is China. So what the British could not do in 47, has the Americans paved the way for China to get a direct link into Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf? Is there any guarantee that there will not be a China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran axis through which China will be able to directly access not only the Persian Gulf and Indian Ocean also, but also combine its strength, including the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, because they are already there in South China Sea. So between South China Sea and Persian Gulf, there are two oceans, the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. How is the US going to prevent this from happening? And then what happens to the much talked about world order, which is being threatened? Can the Quad prevent it? I doubt. This is where India's strategic outlook comes. I am not talking of a conflict situation, but I am talking of a strategy through which India will have to engage with Afghanistan. India will have to continue its engagement with Iran so that the region remains peaceful and the people of the region get a responsible government in their respective countries, which will reflect the hopes and aspirations of the people, and which will not be represented by mercenary warfare agents. This is what we will have to look at. If this is the idea behind it, we will need not only people, but also a cogent foreign policy, which of course we are working out. So in this, from our point of view, what is it that we can contribute? I know a number of students here are worried about their future, which is very, very valid. As an institution, Pune University is also worried, ICCR is worried, the Government of India is worried. And there are a number of initiatives that all of us are taking. We are reaching out to the students, we are reaching out to people who have stranded here, and there could be a policy change as far as extension of visa is concerned. There are so many other things that we can do. And in fact, as students and as victims of all that is happening, we are free to come out with suggestions which the Government of India, I am sure, will consider. But it's going to be a war of nerves. For a very long time, we will have to engage with the situation, watch it closely and carefully, and strategize in such a manner that we will be able to retrieve the situation to the best of our advantage without much of collateral damage. So we'll have to look at the situation from that point of view. It's a very strange situation which has been forced upon us. We did not ask for this day, but it has dawned on us. We couldn't have prevented this. So we'll have to tackle this issue. As a team, as a team of collective responsible persons, we will have to engage with this and think about a strategy where every Afghan citizen, student in Afghanistan is safe. Every Afghani citizen and student who is out of Afghan is also safe. And the region remains peaceful. And we are able to reduce the flashpoints that are emerging out of the present situation. So if we are able to come to such a conclusion, we will be all, should be able to thank ourselves for dealing with such a situation. As I said earlier, I am not an expert on these subjects. I am not an expert on foreign policy. I am not an expert on Afghanistan also. But we are all trying to gather as much information as possible and see to it that we are able to overcome the present calamity present status, present situation in such a manner that it finally ends in the best possible manner for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. There will be a question answer. Just wait for a couple of minutes. Now, I would request Professor Arvind Kumar, who is a professor and chairperson, Center for Canadian, United States and Latin American Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, Delhi. Sir, floor is with you. Thank you.
Honorable Vice-Chancellor and other dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, faculty, and my dear students. It is really a privilege for me to address all of you on an issue which is still unfolding. And after listening to Dr. Sheshadri Chari, who gave a very comprehensive presentation on the various dimensions of this challenge, I would like to emphasize on certain specific points, which again is being perceived by India and how that has to be addressed, and how the rest of the world really has been attempting to devise a strategy to deal with this reality. It is highly unfortunate, but it has become a geopolitical reality that Taliban has occupied the seat of power again. And obviously, they were looking for such opportunity because they had never become dormant. And this again dates back when the whole situation really became so difficult for Afghanistan to manage, especially after the 9/11 event, and the US intervened and launched that global war on terrorism in October 2001, and they were ousted from their seat of power. I think that humiliation they had not forgotten. The humiliation which they got from ousting of the power in 2001 remained in their minds all the time. And instead of weakening their base, especially if you see the Afghanistan map, you will find the way they really have made a very strong base in the southern part of Afghanistan, and were leading their own legal code. Even if there was a rule, and obviously that rule of the land in Afghanistan, in Kabul, these Talibans were not following any of the code of legal principles which were evolved at Kabul. And if you see the different ethnicity and the ethnic groups, you will find that 70% of Afghans, they are Pashtuns. And the way Taliban was able to mobilize these Pashtuns in their favor, again, is a different story altogether. And obviously, instead of strengthening the Northern Alliance, which were active during the early part of 90s, until Taliban was created in 1994, 1996, they occupied the seat of power. And obviously, the last 20 years really was very, very challenging for the United States to limit the growing influence of Taliban. It's not that the United States had gone just to find Osama bin Laden. In fact, their responsibility was also to see that how they are able to really build the democratic regime in a manner by which there is a participation from the local Afghan populace. Unfortunately, the United States never really attempted even to train the local populace of Afghanistan how to fight with Taliban. And that blunder which they did in terms of just banking upon their own army, that created an opportunity for Taliban. Instead of weakening their base, they were basically strengthening their base all across the decades, the couple of decades. The United States, when they saw that it is very difficult for them to continue the way they were continuing, and I think one has to understand the US strategy across presidencies. And very rightly pointed by Dr. Chari that since the intervention of the Soviet Union in 1979, how that really became a part of challenge for South Asian region in particular, and the whole of the world, across the world, that how that really was seen as a part of Cold War rivalry, and the US intervention really happened. And to an extent, the way the US had really intervened in terms of seeing that the Soviet Union withdraws after a certain point in time, and they withdrew. They took almost a decade. That 5-year period from 1989 to 1994 is very interesting geopolitically. Interesting because that really provided certain ample, in fact, reasoning for this group to really move ahead and radicalize their own section of people. 1996, when they occupied the seat of power, how they became completely antagonistic to the United States. Those groups which were working for the United States, they became antagonistic to the United States. And that really continued for a longer period. So what I mean to highlight here, that last 20 years of the history, again, was very interesting because the US was not successful enough to weaken the base of Taliban, and that really gave a lot of impetus to this Taliban to move ahead and keep strengthening their base across Afghanistan. The various presidencies came since 1979. You had Jimmy Carter, you had Ronald Reagan, you had Senior Bush, you had Clinton, you had, again, Junior Bush, you had President Obama, and you had President Trump. If you really analyze their strategy towards Afghanistan, 5-6 presidency, you will find there was a lack of consistency in terms of their approaches, in terms of dealing with Taliban. When President Obama announced the drawdown strategy, that now the US troop is going to be withdrawn, he really came up with a timeline. He gave a framework that why the US troop needs to get withdrawn from Afghanistan. A lot of questions were raised that unless and until the purpose for which the US troops had come to Afghanistan is achieved, how can they really even think of getting withdrawn without completing the task? The task was not well defined. The task was not well defined. The task was again to see that how the United States creates their sphere of influence, and that again expand their principles, their culture. Everything was becoming so different and difficult for the local Afghan populace. And the rise of Taliban again started happening because the way the US started dealing with them, they were able to categorize what is a good Taliban and what is a bad Taliban. And these categories of understanding of the United States obviously were done on the basis of very limited knowledge about the growing influence of Taliban in the southern part of Afghanistan. And that somehow was not understood well. So I think the whole idea of Taliban coming and occupying seat of power again became a part of geopolitical necessity for them. And the rest of the world kept watching, especially in the context of seeing that how Taliban, instead of getting contained, how Taliban is coming. And obviously, if you see the last 10 days of this unfolding of this event, you will come to the conclusion that the rest of the world was simply watching. And obviously, the president flew to UAE. I think that, again, really saw some sort of a different, in fact, lack of confidence among local Afghan populace, because that is something which should not have been done. The preparedness, in fact, when the US withdrew completely, the preparedness to deal with Taliban was not sufficiently dealt with by the Afghan government and obviously by the United States in particular. If we really now try to infer from such experience, one thing is very clear, that foreign rule in any part of the world will always be temporary. And as last 20 years, obviously the puppet regime was formed by the United States. They were trying to really, in fact, promote their interest technically in terms of seeing that how their position and their influence gets completely, remains intact in Afghanistan. The point where, in fact, how India has been perceiving this, I think India's stakes are very high. India certainly was never a part of that global war on terrorism. India was very limited in terms of its growing influence or its contribution in building infrastructure, in building capacity. And India was really committed to do all this. If one country which has done anything in Afghanistan, that is India. And that is now being acknowledged by the rest of the world. The US has done nothing technically in terms of promoting the interest of the local Afghan populace. India was always there, and the type of investment which India has done, I think, is all visible. You can witness these things. India has roughly invested $4 billion in Afghanistan in terms of building infrastructure of various kinds. India has committed to build capacity. In fact, one of these things started almost 15 years ago. The then Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, had visited Afghanistan, and in one of these formal conversations happening between him and this Hamid Karzai, In fact, when he mentioned that now Afghanistan has lost a couple of generations, India shall do something for Afghanistan. So all these providing a scholarship to the student started since 2006, 2007. And that really is some sort of a good contribution on part of India to help the younger generation of Afghanistan in building capacity. India is now in a position, India was considering, India is now in a position to leverage its soft power diplomacy by promoting and building educational institutions in Afghanistan. But the conducive environment is a necessity for India to move ahead and go and build certain educational institutions in Afghanistan. That was the next step, especially in the context of promoting Afghanistan's interest in the region. A more stable, prosperous Afghanistan will always be in India's interest. Dr. Chari said that Afghanistan does not share border with India. No, Afghanistan shares borders with India because we have to go by our principle, that is Pakistan occupied Kashmir is part of India. And in that context, we share 106 kilometers of border with Afghanistan. And unfortunately, whatever India did as a part of building infrastructure, I think that is something which we need to understand. It was not done through this route. Pakistan never allowed, never wanted India to enhance its presence in Afghanistan. India had to take the Central Asia route. And that really was something which India did and also leveraged its soft power diplomacy in Central Asia. Tajikistan is one of the beneficiaries. You see the location of Afghanistan. You see that how many countries Afghanistan shares border with. It shares border with, it's a landlocked country. It really shares borders with Iran. It shares border with this Central Asian country like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. If you see that, it is very important country in South Asia strategically. The Cold War rivalry obviously brought these two alternate poles of power in Afghanistan to build their sphere of influence. And that created more problem in South Asia than finding any resolution to any of the challenges in South Asia. And that really kept continuing. It is not that it happened only 20 years ago. In fact, we have to really do certain good academic exercise. You being a student, do a good academic exercise, especially finding the geopolitical context under which the Soviets had come in 1979 and the way they left in 1989. And from 1989 to 1994, the creation of the Taliban happened. 1996, occupation of the seat of power, first time by Taliban. That 5 years of Taliban rule in Afghanistan, how that really led to the decline of Afghanistan's culture. How that saw a different Afghanistan altogether. And again, the ousting of Afghanistan, in last 20 years, what type of difference one can see happening in Afghanistan? And what is going to be the likely future now? Because that should really be very important, especially in terms of understanding whether this Sharia law, which they are talking about, that they are going to implement that Sharia law, is that going to be different than the Sharia law which they had introduced in 1996? And ultimately, the type of these various nuances, one has to understand not only from the Taliban's perspective, but from the rest of the world's perspective, how they are perceiving that, how it is going to be, what type of challenges might accrue in the foreseeable future. I think there is no denying the fact that Taliban occupying the seat of power in Afghanistan will have negative consequences for the peace and stability in the region. But at the same time, a number of countries which have been showing certain element of interest by again telling, without doing in-depth study on Taliban's psychological intentions, their fundamental goals, their behavioral patterns, they still have been trying to engage with Taliban. As you might recollect that when Taliban occupied the seat of power in 1996, only 3 countries had recognized: United Arab Emirates, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. Now, there is a possibility that this time that numbers might grow. The domestic constituents of Afghanistan, that has to be understood, especially in the context of the economic dimension, the political dimension, and the social dimension. And once that understanding is really given in terms of seeing that what impact Taliban will have on the local populace, how that would be going to pose more challenge, and obviously seeing that how they are going to really impose certain stringent mechanism that could really be fatal for the mankind. And that is going to be something which one has to understand, and that would really see a lot of challenge. And obviously, as a consequence of Taliban's occupying the seat of power, I think India in particular has to be extra cautious. Why India has to be extra cautious? Because India's stakes remain very high. And even if Taliban has been telling India that India has to complete all the ongoing projects, India is welcome. But India has to really be cautious in terms of understanding their intentions and seeing that in what ways that could really be promote the overall local populace of Afghanistan's interests. And if that is done, I think India certainly will keep continuing in helping Afghan local populace by building capacity. Already a lot of projects which India has been doing, I think is going to be continuing. And many of these cultural exchanges, which keeps happening as a part of a student exchange, as a part of students coming from Afghanistan, that will see certain pause, especially in coming years, because of this Taliban's role. There is no denying the fact. So one has to really come up with certain set of understanding by which, in what ways India will keep continuing its engagement in Afghanistan, irrespective of whether it recognizes Taliban or not recognizes Taliban. That again is a question of debate in the current context. The other challenge, which was again accrued because of the US behavioral pattern, the United States never included even Afghan government, leave India, even Afghan government in all the negotiations which they were doing with Taliban. And that is something which was not expected from the United States. One was that they really never thought the importance or the necessity of the inclusion of the Afghan government in the negotiation which they were having with Taliban. So the mistakes which they committed in the last 1 decade obviously were becoming more and more visible, and without having sufficient base made in terms of seeing the overall preparedness of Afghanistan, they left. So question is that now they also are watching the overall, this whole Taliban issue, and also they would like to see that how they are going to address this in a manner. In fact, nothing came out. In fact, NATO met that what a strategy NATO could have now, and ultimately there was a lack of consensus on the part of NATO to really come up with a definite strategy, especially in terms of dealing with this Taliban issue. So I think the civil society of Afghanistan obviously has to become dominant. I think they really have to put more effort in terms of dealing with Taliban, and that could perhaps help build confidence. And obviously that could promote the domestic stability. If they are not able to deal with Taliban and they will keep banking on the outside powers, the challenges will remain. The challenges are not going to be resolved. So the first and foremost thing which India would like to, even covertly, India can help these groups to really become more assertive and confident in terms of dealing with Taliban. And that perhaps is one area where India has to work with Afghan's civil society. The other thing, again, which is very important, that the way the evacuation is happening, you can see that and you feel that how this evacuation is going to help Afghanistan. I think that is something which is, again, going to prove highly detrimental to Afghanistan's peace and stability. And the whole exodus of Afghans across the world, if that is going to happen, that is also not going to solve the problem when Taliban has occupied the seat of power. So I think evacuation should really be avoided in the current context. The civil society has to be strengthening their base in terms of understanding the larger emerging complexities and coming up with certain set of strategy to deal with Taliban. Because Taliban, as I said, has become a part of geopolitical reality. It cannot really be seen going in 1 day or 2 days. It is going to be continuing now. Only thing is that how best the civil society will engage with this Taliban. How Taliban will engage with the civil society, how best they can moderate the existing Sharia law, how best they can come up with certain principles which could really help build a strong society. I think the society has to be strengthened. The economy comes next. Unless the society is strengthened, the economic dimension is not going to be working. And by the way, let me tell you, in the last 20 years, if you see the Taliban's finances, it has really been multiplied into a number of times. From different sources, I think the finances which Taliban controls right now is more than the overall Afghan economy in the current context. So they have come fully prepared. The type of arms, ammunitions, their overall economic condition, everything you can make out from their appearance. And that is something which is visible now. And from different sources, their overall funding, Al-Qaeda funds them. They get a lot of money through extortions. They get a lot of money from drug trafficking, and a lot of things which they do. In fact, one study was done, which was really saying that these are the ways by which they are getting funded. So this time, they have come with all preparation. Economically, they are very strong, more stronger than the current Afghan's economy. Just you can imagine. So ultimately, one has to really come up with a good set of a strategy on the part of Afghan civil society that how best they can deal with Taliban. Leaving Afghanistan is not a solution. Let me tell you, leaving Afghanistan is not at all a solution. Evacuation of Afghan populace, which is happening in the last 10 days, is not going to help Afghanistan. They have to be in their country. They have to be finding ways to deal with Taliban. And in that context, obviously, India can find ways to help the civil society covertly, because India is obviously not showing any sign of engaging with Taliban in the current context. The future scenario might be different. India might like to engage with Taliban. Seeing the geopolitical condition and the emerging situation, obviously a number of countries are showing interest in terms of engaging with Taliban, because that is what I think will put certain form of limit in terms of the nature of governance which they had portrayed during 1996 to 2001. The nature of governance has to get changed by this particular Taliban, and that is how we'll allow the rest of the world to really be, in fact, engaging with them in a manner by which the local Afghan populace becomes more confident. I think leaving Afghanistan is not going to be helping them. So, my dear students, one thing I can tell you, that you should not be worrying much about what is happening. You should be finding ways and mechanisms, because your generation is going to be very important for Afghanistan. So, you need to really build capacity in whatever area you really have been showing interest, and really see that how best you can come up with certain good idea and share those ideas in a manner by which Afghanistan becomes stable. Afghanistan has to be prosperous. It has to be finding sustenance at every level. It has to be stable. Then only this whole region of South Asia will become stable. If India has to become a rising power, one of the responsibility India has to build conducive environment in its neighborhood. If India fails in building conducive environment in neighborhood, I think India's aspiration to become rising power again would be getting curtailed. So I think a lot of these things one has to understand geopolitically. We have to understand this problem in a multifaceted dimension. There is not going to be one dimension. You have to understand this at the political level, political dimension, economic dimension, social dimension, cultural dimension, diplomatic dimension. Every dimension is important to come up with a good set of a strategy in dealing with this current geopolitical reality that Taliban has occupied the seat of power. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Arvind Kumar. Both of speakers has set the tone for discussion, and floor is open for discussion. My colleague will circulate the mic among the student. Particularly, we would like to respond by the Afghan student, and I would like to request all Afghan students, whatever queries they just get it from them, what you understand, the geopolitical perspective. Apart from that, any kind of issue, you can ask the question. Thank you. Before, please introduce yourself and which course you are studying.
Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you, everyone, to provide this program to we hear about the strategy of India in Afghanistan, and also we speak about the situation of Afghanistan. This is Ahmadzia Rohani. I completed my bachelor in Pune University and their BBA field. I go back to my country in 1 month. I went back to my country 1 month ago. In this last crisis, at the 15th of August, I come back to India. And just for now, I have a question from Dr. Chari, sir. Sir, you told in your speech that U.S. chose the Afghanistan to play their role in Cold War. Now, there is two questions. Does U.S. arrive to their goal in Afghanistan? And Afghanistan was the best place to America. And the second question is this. Now, U.S. will leave the Afghanistan, and Afghanistan will become the second Vietnam in the world. Thank you, sir.
Two more questions, please. First, give priority to the Afghan students.
Hello everyone here. Thank you so much, Honorable Vice-Chancellor Vijay Khare sir, Director of International Center. You've just left Umrani sir, and the respected guest, Dr. Arvind Kumar sir and Chari sir. And that was really interesting interaction for me, especially as a student of political science and from Afghanistan. That was like very informative for me, and very systematically I've just got what is going on over there. I have just one question from Dr. Arvind Kumar sir. Sir, what will be the things that Taliban has to do for India to recognize them as a government? I mean, what will be the things and initiative that they have to take so that India could recognize them as a government? Thank you so much.
Hello, this is me, Mahmoudin Khashi, graduated from Political Science, Ferguson College. And right now I'm doing my master's degree in Defense Strategic Studies, second semester. What do you think is, I don't know whom should I recall for the answer, about Durand Line in Pakistan. As we know, the Taliban has been funded by, before when they started to grow, they have got funded from, I suppose, from Saudi Arabia, and the UK was behind it, and the US was behind it, and Pakistan was the practicing management over there. So if the Durand Line is not clear and Taliban occupied, I don't know what would be the possible solution for this. Like, maybe it's a somehow pre-planned scenario, or somehow like considering the US is sitting on the assets of Afghanistan over there, and if the Taliban did not go or do well with US, then the resource which US is sitting on might be no more for Afghan people, and it might be somehow complicated thing for Afghan to build an infrastructure and capacity building. So what do you think about Durand Line, basically? My question is.
Hello everyone, honorable personalities. I'm very happy to see you all today here, because when we see you all behind of us, we are feeling strong and we are feeling motivation. Hello each and everyone who are all attending here. This is Farzana Amiri. I'm doing international business in Mumbai department. It's my third year, and I'm the coordinator of Afghan student in Pune. So today I'm very happy to become introduced with Arvind Kumar sir and Nitin Kumar sir and the others, because we are very happy to meet you all here. My specific question is, you sir, about the impact of happening war in Afghanistan to India, because India is helping Afghanistan from so many years back, which we have noticed about the Parliament of Afghanistan, about the airplane of Afghanistan, about school, university, and everything. Right now, Pakistan is supporting Taliban. So I think Taliban are, want to, like the way of they are trying to break Afghanistan, they can do some against of India. So the exact impact of Afghanistan war for India and also the plan of India for Afghanistan student and Afghanistan resident right now. So what India can do right now. This is my two questions if you would like to answer it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for very interesting questions. Let me address the very important question which he has raised, that for what Taliban shall be doing for India's recognition. I think one thing is very clear, that the current form of Taliban, which is highly aggressive, is not going to be considered by India or for any other country across the globe other than Pakistan and the like-minded countries of that time. So if Taliban becomes democratic, if Taliban does not stresses on Sharia laws, if Taliban believes in inclusive nature of society, and if Taliban gives up the violence and all the arms and ammunitions and takes that democratic route, I think India will have no problem in terms of recognizing Taliban. So that is the thing which they have to understand. The impact of Taliban on India, I think is very important. I think the way Pakistan has shown its behavioral pattern by releasing the prisoners, and obviously that is aimed towards India. Pakistan has been working with a single-minded aim to destabilize India. So obviously there is going to be an intensification of terrorist activities as long as Pakistan-Taliban nexus becomes that strong. And they will obviously prove highly detrimental to India's interest, and see that how Taliban and Pakistan together intensify all their effort in seeing that India is all the time embroiled in addressing to the internal challenges which might emanate from homegrown terrorist groups. So the nexus which they might like to build is the terrorist group which are located in Pakistan, Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jamaat-e-Dawa, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and how they will build nexus with India's homegrown terrorists. And that would really be an effort by Taliban to help them. As I told, that we share 106 kilometers of border with Afghanistan. And that 106-kilometer border lies in the current context with the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So that is going to be used by this terrorist group to build certain strategy which could prove highly detrimental to India's interests. So India certainly is going to be a victim of Taliban in the foreseeable future, but India's preparedness in the current context is becoming such where it would be able to prevent such acts to happen. So India has really slowly and steadily been able to improve and see that all the requirements which are needed to, in fact, contain the cross-border infiltration, cross-border terrorism is addressed. It is happening now.
That was very well pointed out. So nothing much to add in that. But one issue that my friend raised in the first place about Afghanistan becoming another Vietnam. That is what the Taliban is saying. Taliban is saying that we have won and America has lost. So that is what the Vietnamese said. We have won, but America has lost. But then the difference there is Vietnam was one unit. The fighting force of Vietnam was not created by the Americans. It was an internal force that was created there. Maybe those who were against the American interest at that time they helped it. That is a different story. But then it was not a force that was created by the US which fought against the US in Vietnam. So that we should remember. Whereas Taliban was created by the Americans. So that Frankenstein monster which they have created is now after their blood. Therefore, if Taliban now says that we have defeated the Americans have defeated themselves. That is the difference, A. B. The intrinsic strength of Vietnam was very different. And it could be manifested. Intrinsic strength of Afghanistan also is very good, but Afghanistan has been undergoing a tumultuous period since almost 1975. So this brings down the total capacity of a country. So if you are under a foreign rule for more than 100, 200 years, you tend to lose some of your repository strength. That happens to India also, that happened here also, that happens to all the countries around the world. So we will have to go back into our cultural moorings, we will have to go back into our civilizational strengths. All these things we will have to do. But that is a peacetime work, not a wartime work. And we should remember one more thing. Every country is free to act as far as their interests are concerned. India will undertake certain things which will suit India's interest. America will do certain things that will suit American interest. So where the conflict comes is when there is a conflict of interest. So when the conflict of interest comes, you both suffer. There is a conflict of interest between the way US looks at Afghanistan and Afghan people look at Afghanistan. So there has to be a sense of purpose, a sense of unity, a sense of strength within the civil society of Afghanistan, which is very important. If that is not there, somebody or the other is going to keep coming and disturbing the peace and tranquility within the civil society system. And that affects the civilizational growth process. So this civilizational growth process, which is an evolution, also is timed. So that should not happen in Afghanistan. That is what is worrying. As Professor Arvind Kumar very rightly said, what should Taliban do if it wants to be recognized by India? In fact, the question should be what Taliban should not do if it wants to be recognized by India. And they know it better and we also know it better. Another point is the question of Durand Line. We should all remember, consistently Afghanistan has not accepted the Durand Line as the final line. So that goes back to 1947, that goes back to Radcliffe arrangement, and then there are a number of other documents which we have to go in. So we have also, India has also not accepted. In successive Afghan governments, India has always said that what they are doing and what they are saying is correct. So that is going to be a very strong flashpoint between Afghanistan and Pakistan. So we should not come to a conclusion that it's a great victory for Pakistan and China. No, it is not. In fact, even when Mullah Baradar himself went to meet the Chinese leadership, Chinese foreign minister very strongly put forward it's not just a request but an order that ETIM should be reined in. So obviously there are no reports that Mullah Baradar agreed that ETM will be reined in, but it cannot be. ETM is creating a huge problem as far as China is concerned. So it's not going to be resolved very easily. And if Taliban wants to control ETIM, it will be a very dangerous situation as far as Taliban is concerned. It's already facing resistance from Panjshir. It will face resistance from ETIM also. Again, China also wants Afghanistan to play a role which will benefit China as far as the freedom fighters in Balochistan is concerned. So when that starts happening, there will be resistance from Balochistan side also. So there will be resistance from Panjshir, the Northern Alliance, Balochistan and ATIM. So Taliban is not one monolithic institution or an organization. And it is not an ethnic organization, unlike in Vietnam. So it's very difficult to imagine one Taliban which really represents the people of Afghanistan. It does not represent the people of Afghanistan, and it is not a monolithic organization. It's just a group of factions. So when it comes to assertion of tribal identities in Afghanistan, there will be a huge problem which Taliban will face. So these are the areas which are going to be very challenging, not only for Taliban, but also for the region. And that is where the countries around Afghanistan will also have to coordinate. Instead of looking at their own national interest, we will have to look at the interest of the people of Afghanistan, and how best we can do it is what we have to think of. Thank you.
My name is Mohammed Ahmadi. I can see proudly that I am one of the senior students of Pune University for that past 10 years, and I am the representative of the entire Afghan students in Maharashtra, as well as I carry forward the educational relations with Shiv Sena political party. First of all, I wanted to express my heartily gratitude for the opportunities which are provided by Pune University and the rest of the Indian institutions for Afghan students in this critical condition. I just wanted to say that Islam, it should be followed by each and every individual person willingly, but not forcefully. We can never forget 26/11 or 9/11, which was the result of this terrorist group. And we can never accept this terrorist group's presence in Afghanistan. Therefore, my question is, as you know right now, there are some resistance groups in Afghanistan. They are active still, especially in Panjshir, as well as there's another person by the name of Commander Alipur. They have already shown they are fighting against this terrorist group in Afghanistan. So if the situation might be suitable, are you ready to provide any military assistance for this resistance group that they can carry forward their fight against Taliban and this terrorist group? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for inviting us in this really important discussion. And I'm Rashda Shahobi. I completed my MA in the MA Politics and Public Administration. And my question is that I followed the speech of Biden, Barack Obama, and also other politicians from America, that they said we ended the war in Afghanistan. We wanted to end the war in Afghanistan. But now we saw that there is no end in war in Afghanistan. But what are the reasons behind this, that they can't end the war in Afghanistan? I want to know the reasons. What are the reasons that they say that we wanted to put an end, put a dot in war in Afghanistan, but they can't do it like that? But what are the reasons about this issue?
Good afternoon, panelists. Thank you for this amazing and informative lecture. My name is Ameya Kelkar, and I am a student in the Global Peace, Security, and Strategic Studies program in the department. My question is regarding China's involvement, sir. Considering their whole idea of encircling India strategically through Pakistan and their BRI project, which they're gung-ho about, to use unparliamentary language, how far do you see China willing to, how should I say, expand their footprint in Afghanistan the way they have done in Pakistan, sir? The way they have informally annexed Pakistan and made it an informal puppet state of sorts. Do you see the same sort of strategy being played out by them in Afghanistan? If yes, why? And if no, why not, sir? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for these very interesting questions. So let me again reiterate on the fact which I highlighted during my lecture, that if one has to do something against Taliban, which is a geopolitical reality now, the civil society of Afghanistan has to be strengthening itself. And India certainly will be helping that civil society in a covert manner or, if possible, overt manner, whenever it is needed. Because India certainly would like to see Afghanistan a very stable, prosperous, and really completely democratic. So that is what India would like to see Afghanistan to be. Because of our stakes, which are very high, Afghanistan has all the time been very closely working with India on various areas, despite all sorts of odds. As I was telling you that when India wanted to do something in Afghanistan, it had to take the Central Asia route. There was no direct route, despite the fact we share border with Afghanistan. So we had to take Central Asia route to reach Afghanistan. And all these investments which India has done is through that route. So I think civil society has to become dominant in the current context. There is no other way by which Afghanistan can get back to normalcy unless the civil society becomes united. That is what, but the problem is that by force, the Taliban has been able to mobilize the civil society in their favor. 70% of Pashtuns, I think almost everyone has become a part of Taliban. So I think if you see that configuration, the challenges lie with the other small ethnic groups, Uzbeks, Hazaras, they're very small ethnic groups. So how, in fact, India, how basically Afghanistan has to work to see that Pakistan becomes stable has to be done by civil society. The Biden thing which you asked and the various speeches which they have made, let me tell you, any foreign rule obviously will be detrimental to bring that particular area peace and stable. So this, in one way, the foreign rule has been ended. Now Taliban basically has occupied the seat of power. Now the challenge is far too many for stability, at least. For the people of Afghanistan right now, it is some sort of a great challenge to make Afghanistan normal. And everything takes time. But the way the things were given to Taliban were not handled properly by the civil society and the current government in Afghanistan. Despite the fact that they were ruling for 20 years, 20 long years, if you are not able to build confidence among the people of Afghanistan, if the ruler is not able to build a strong army and the local populace is not well trained, whatever the manner they were supposed to be trained to fight with Taliban, and if that group is allowing the radicalization of the society, all these things happen against Taliban, against Afghanistan's interest. And that perhaps is now coming out in an open when Taliban saw a very clear route coming and occupying the seat of the power. They entered parliament, which India has constructed. And they occupied, and they, in fact, now there are a lot of debates happening on which flag is going to be used by Taliban. There are 3 flags, 3 groups are coming. So those groups which are not really being a part of Taliban, these groups really need to mobilize the civil society in their favor. And that only can save Afghanistan and Afghans people. India will always be there for Afghanistan's stability. That much I can tell you because of the past which India had with Afghanistan. India will always help in every manner whatsoever to build, to reconstruct the civil society. So that part again is very clear. The last question, which was mostly on Can you just repeat that last question? Yeah, China factor. See, China has been encircling India. And it is something which is creating a lot of challenges for India. There's no denying the fact. But do you know what is China's version? China's version is that India is also encircling China. In a larger way, India also has been trying to build certain, like I will give you an example. India is coming in a big way in Central Asia. Tajikistan, India has built a signal intelligence center. And a lot of things India has been doing and trying to encircle China. But question is the part of the challenge which is coming from China, mainly from their Belt and Road Initiative, which has two components. One is that how best they can connect the landmass across continents, and how best they can connect maritime routes. That is called Maritime Silk Route, MSR. So in that context, they have a big plan. But by and large, India, unless and until India becomes a part of BRI, China will never be successful. So even if they have built ports in Gwadar in Balochistan, which is the largest district of Balochistan in Pakistan, they have built in Chittagong in Bangladesh, they have built a port in Hambantota, everything which they have done largely to promote their interest and build their sphere of influence, which now these countries have been trying to understand the psychological intention of China. And let me tell you that China is now being depicted as a country which is no more assertive, it is becoming aggressive. So China is in transition from being assertive to being aggressive. And that is what is leading China in a different way, especially in building perception in these countries which were proving to be highly detrimental for India. So India also has been planning in a manner by which India's footprints, especially like you know that they went and built a base in Djibouti. And that again was one advances which they did in the recent years. India attempted in building the similar thing in Seychelles. So again, if you take Indian Ocean rim, all the littorals, there are 18 countries in that littorals. And if you see each of these countries, how India has been dealing with that, that is going to be very interesting. India also has been emphasizing more in terms of building a very good relationship with its extended neighborhood, which is the whole Southeast Asia. All the 10 countries if you take, which really comes in that, whether it is Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, this side, Malaysia, here you have Myanmar. A lot of things India has been doing, especially in terms of changing the footprints of China. So again, it's a geopolitical game, geopolitical rivalry, and India-China rivalry now is becoming more visible. By the way, let me tell you one thing. If the center of gravity, which has to get shifted from the west to the east, that center of gravity will never shift unless India and China work together. So they have to work together. And the West and the US, they wanted India and China to have a conflict. Because if India and China have a conflict, that center of gravity will never shift. So it's a great geopolitical game which has to be understood by India. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are a few questions, but while taking a tea, you can interact with the experts. I would request Dr. Sanjay Dhole will propose the vote of thanks. After proposing the vote of thanks, I would request each one to stand for national anthem. And after national anthem, we'll join for cup of tea. Each one will join the club. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm standing here to pay vote of thanks for today's program, especially the interaction with Afghan students. And the main issues was on the geopolitical and strategic impact of Afghan crisis. So first of all, let me thanks for both the dignitaries and the speakers, especially Professor Sheshadri Chari, who is the well-known strategic and foreign analyst, and another, the speaker that we have today, the Professor Arvind Kumar from JNU, Both of them have really spoken well and enlightened on the recent crisis in Afghanistan. So they have not only elaborated the aspect that they have, they elaborated the various aspects of the crisis and the maybe forthcoming issues, not only as far as the India's and Afghanistan relations are concerned, but also the worldwide. So they also talked about the historical, the background, and the relation of the India and the Afghanistan. So Professor Arvind Kumar has rightly pointed out about that suppose if really the India wants to establish a relation with the Taliban, then Taliban has to put their path on the democratic way. So this is what very important aspect that he has told. And so, sir, thank you very much for sparing very valuable time and very good interaction with the student from, especially from the Afghan. So let me thank our Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Professor Nitin Karmalkar, who chaired this particular session and the program. And Karmalkar sir is always very supportive and very helpful. So when this crisis occurred a few days back, immediately he took an action, and we come together and discuss various issues along with our management council member Rajeshji Pandey, and so that sir is always helpful. So thank you very much, sir, for chairing this particular program which has been organized by the university itself. So there are many dignitaries and the guest of honors present on the dais and off the dais. So especially I just want to take their name because they spared a lot of time and also took a part in this particular interaction. So our the Pro Vice Chancellor, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Honorable Professor Umrani, the Management Council member, the Rajeshji Pandey, and the Dean of Faculty of Commerce and the Management, Professor Karmalkar, and in the audience, Bhushan, the Air Marshal Bhushan Gokhale is there, and there are many other dignitaries who are sitting in front of me. Apart from that, there are the heads of the department and the directors who are also there in the audience. And especially I just want to thank the Afghan student, especially the Farzana and the Wali and maybe Mohammadi. They took very, the very constructive the interaction, took part in the constructive interaction. And I hope that all the speakers who might have satisfied the queries that you have in your mind. And of course, on behalf of our university and our Vice Chancellor, we always extend our help to you in all the aspect. So thank you very much for sparing all the time. And oh, yeah, okay. So, thank you very much for sparing your valuable time for all of you. And so with this, so I request all of you to stand. So there will be a national anthem.
Jana Gana Mana Adhinayaka Jaya